Good afternoon, Maine. This is Chuck Ellis, and you are watching the Muddy Waters podcast, which is back after an almost 3-week hiatus as I went off to visit my beautiful wife, pictured right here at our wedding in Kenya. I made a wise, lifelong decision for my marriage to not do a podcast while I was there visiting her for only 2 weeks. She says it was only one because it was 2 days less than 2 weeks or 1 day less, whatever it was. So I'm back. Here you are in the Muddy Waters podcast, which exists to help the people of Maine better understand what's going on in our state by bringing people on from around the state. Today, we have with us Carmen Calabrese. Am I pronouncing that right? Calabrese?
Calabrese.
Calabrese. Okay, that's what I thought. That's trying to do it phonetically, but then whatever it is. But sometimes it doesn't work that way. So, Carmen is looking to challenge Susan Collins for the U.S. Senate here in the state of Maine. So, thanks for joining us, Carmen.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. There are two things that this podcast exists for, I guess. One is to, create a platform for candidates to be able to let people know. I mean, this is part of informing the people. It does fall into what I had just mentioned earlier, but one of the ways we do that is by bringing people on to talk about what's going on in our state who are experts in business and economics and whatever it might, in medicine and wherever it might be. But also to bring on candidates to talk about who they are so the people of Maine better understand who the candidates are and why they might want to vote for them. So this is part of why we exist. Just wanted to give you an opportunity to let the people of Maine know who you are. I mean, running against a long-term incumbent, is a challenge in and of itself, but especially if people don't know who you are. Right. So, would love to have an opportunity to kind of start off the podcast by just talking about who you are, where you come from, and what would possess you. I think one of the questions I ask is, what would possess you to get involved in politics in the first place in our current environment. And then we can get into more about the specifics of Susan Collins. What are your issues and all that kind of stuff. But first, who are you, where you come from? Why are you running?
Okay. Well, I was born and raised in South Philadelphia, and after 8th grade, moved to Ohio, went to high school in Ohio and college in Ohio. And then after that, I've kind of moved quite a bit. I've moved to New York City, moved out to San Francisco, lived out down in Florida for the past, I've lived here in Maine for 6 years next month. And then before that was in Florida for about 25 years. So I've kind of moved all over the country and moved up here to the state of Maine. My best friend since we were freshmen in high school was having a tough situation and he needed some help. And at that time I could live anywhere in the country that I wanted to. And I told my best friend, Danny, I said, Danny, if you find us an apartment, I'll move to Maine. I'll help you out. And we've been living here at, it's kind of funny because you look, I can't remember the name of the movie with Walter Matthau, where the two old guys that live next to each other.
Grumpy old men. Is that the one?
Yeah, that's it. Well, we're two grumpy old men, except we live in the same apartment.
Okay.
So that's how that's going. So, and I've lived all over. For the 25 years that I lived in Florida, I owned my own restaurants. We had 3 restaurants in Tallahassee, my business partner and I, and then those ended, and not in a pleasant way, but things happen. And so then I didn't know what I wanted to do. And my mother, we were sitting talking one night and I said, Mom, I don't know what to do. I've had these restaurants for 22 years. And she said, well, you know what's funny? You've always liked to drive. You like trucks. So she said, why don't you go be a truck driver? I said, Mom, I've been to college. I've been to MBA school. I can't go drive a truck. What are you kidding? And she just laughed. She said, well, you'll like it. just get out and do it and clear your mind, and just kind of set yourself straight for what you want to do in the future. So that's what I've been doing since then, and I enjoy it. Right now, I drive for Walmart. I drive over the road for Walmart,
Yep.
and so I get to see a lot of people. I get to talk to a lot of people. Being Italian, I'm pretty easy to talk to. We generally like to talk a lot, so that's one of the things, and it's great. And so that has brought me to being a small business owner, and then talking to people who are kind of on the front lines or middle America, those type of things, is really, that's kind of what pushed me into politics. And
Hmm.
when I was living in Tallahassee is the state capital of Florida, and so I got to know a lot of politicians because one of my restaurants was right across the street from the Capitol. I actually got to meet, Jeb Bush would come in quite often. Rick Scott came in, and so I, got to know. Well, way back when we first opened, Lawton Childs was the governor then, and he came in a few times. So I, got to talk to a lot of those guys, a lot of senators, a lot of House members were in the restaurant, and so I got interested in politics then. And also being a small business owner, you have to be interested in what's going on in politics and what's going on, with taxes and regulations and things like that. So you're always involved that way, and that's kind of what's brought me to where I'm at right now.
Nice. Wow. So that's so I guess that's what's kind of kept you involved in politics and got you interested. One of the questions I think I have is like, so partly because I got this so I've run for office a couple times. I ran for state house, right? And
Okay.
when I went to run for state house, I talked to somebody in my district, and they're like, "Well, have you ever run for anything before?" In other words, like, have you been on city council and school board? Because I think a lot of people think about these things, and they're like, well, if you're going to run for U.S. Senate, do you have any other like political experience, for instance? And
Sure.
anyway, so not just yeah. I'll let you answer the question, and then we
Okay.
can
Well,
yeah.
no, I don't have any political experience other than being elected to campus activities council when I was in college. So
Sure.
no, I haven't had any experience being in the office, whether it's the House or the Senate, or here in the city, those type of things. But I don't think that really matters. You have
Sure.
to you have I've spent my time talking with people and being in front of people who once you start engaging with people, they begin to tell you what goes on in their lives and what hurts them and those type of things. And I think that when you look at what's going on in Washington right now, there are so many incumbents that have been there for decades, and they've just lost sight of what's going on. And I consider Maine, other than a couple of different cities, Maine is just like middle America. Middle America. We're just small people. We're small town people who are working hard. A lot of them are small business owners, and they're working hard to really make a good life for themselves. And I think that the individuals, whether it's Susan Collins or whether it's Chuck Schumer, or what, you can go down the line of these, Nancy Pelosi, all these individuals that have been in the House or been in the Senate for decades. They've lost touch. They've become complacent, and I don't think that they really understand what the individuals that are down here with their boots on the ground are thinking about and what really affects them. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running for this, because I want to help the small business owners and to help the people. I'm sure we'll get into it in a little while, but the Trump's bill that was passed last week with extending the tax cuts that he put in effect back in 2017, that really helps the small people that that are middle income and those type of things. And there's many other things that are in that bill that really help those kind of individuals, and also small business owners.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that you personally need to be entrenched into those kind of politics, or those, the Washington bubble, because you need new life, you need new ideas, and there have become, individuals that are starting to move into that, and especially on the Republican side, because you've got people like Chip Roy and those individuals that are a little younger and that think a little differently than individuals that are in their 70s and some in their 80s that have been doing this for forever. And they just, like I said, I think they become complacent. They're in that bubble, and they don't even, a lot of them don't even come out and see the people in the state of Maine. And whether it's Susan Collins, and I don't know Angus King, and I don't know Susan Collins, but I know a lot of people on the ground because I'm with them every day. I'm in front of them every day, and most of them, obviously, you don't ever expect to see the governor or the president when you're, just when you live in Bath, or maybe because they have the ironworks there, but those things where, if you're in Lebanon or you're in Gary or in Gray or things like that, you don't ever expect to see someone, but you still have feelings. You still want to talk to people about it, and that's kind of where I feel that I've really benefited by being able to talk to those type of individuals and get the feeling of what their concerns are.
Yeah, well, I think you touch on something, and I think we'll kind of, I want to ask this question because I think it relates to most of what you've been saying. So, if you were to get elected, for instance, would you be in favor of enacting, and would you work toward enacting term limits in Congress? Because, like, that's what you talk about, the complacency. You could even argue that a lot of these people become owned by special interest groups,
right?
Right. But like, would you be in favor of that, and would you work towards that? And yeah,
I would. If on my website, which is Carmen, the number 4 Senate.com, if you go on there, I mention it on there that I plan to be there for 2 terms, and then towards the end of my second term, I want to get out here in Maine and find someone that can replace me, that has the same type of voice, that has the same type of ideals that I have, and so that we can continue to really, like I said, restore American values. And I think that that's where we've kind of fallen off track. But yes, I do believe in term limits. And I think that, our founding fathers, they were farmers, and they were ranchers, and they were small business owners, and they were these type of people. They never intended that being a senator or being a congressman to be your lifelong job. Their job, they felt, was at home, but they went to DC to do the nation's business, and then they went back home again and they did their business. And so that's what I'm looking at, and that's what I think is really what's needed.
Yeah, this idea of like career politicians in Washington
Right.
making millions of dollars, and like, I think I don't know the exact details, but I think it's like, maybe if once you're in there for 2, maybe 3 terms, whatever it is, you get the retirement package. So if you're in the House, you work 6 years, and then you get retirement pay,
Right.
for and like the amount of money that these jokers make outside of the fact that they
Well,
they use
talking
the
about
information they have to do the insider trading, essentially,
right.
all that other kind of stuff, and just all the influence that they have. On top of that, we're paying them in my opinion, an ungodly amount of money, when really this should be something that you're doing for the people, not for personal enrichment. And should there be some money? Yeah, sure. But should it be to the degree that you're like living above the rest of the people? I don't think so.
Right.
Maybe we should pay Congress like we pay teachers, and pay teachers like we pay. I'm just kidding. No,
Yeah.
we can't pay teachers quite that much, but we could.
Well, some get paid depending on what university you work for.
Oh, if they're with the university, especially that story. I don't know if you heard the story about the young girl. It was in the Maine Wire who. This was one of the biggest things to me. Everything else about this story did not surprise me in the least, but she Kate Parker, or Catherine Parker, I think, was, she wrote an article, a speech for speech class,
Uh-huh.
basically against the red flag laws. And her teacher criticized her and made some comments about her ilk, and basically said, pick a different topic. I can't evaluate this appropriately.
Right.
And I don't want this language being spoken in my classroom, essentially.
Right.
None of that surprised me. The part that surprised me is that at a community college, somebody who's teaching English is making $134,000 a year. And I'm like, excuse me? What? What? Anyway, so yeah, when you get into those levels.
And you look at AOC. We'll take her for example. She's been in there now. I think she's on her third term. I think she's been there going on 6 years, and she's all. And like everyone knows, she used to be a bartender and those type of things. And she never, she didn't have any experience going into Washington, but obviously she's been bought and paid for because she's already a millionaire. And how does that happen? And that's something that shouldn't. Yeah, I agree. I think term limits are a good thing.
I think term limits definitely help address those issues and ensure that we get new ideas and new people and different perspectives. Right now, we have like a ruling class and then the rest of us. And you get
those people that have been there for so long that when you can watch reporters ask them the questions. Well, that's how we've always done it. Okay, well, you know what? Let's change it up. Let's communicate with each other and let's change it up and let's make things good for America, not just ourselves.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, so one of the things you mentioned earlier was, and I want to get into some of the issues that you're focused on as well. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but you're talking about term limits. You said, so with Susan Collins, like one of the biggest critiques that I personally have against Susan Collins outside of this, I think that she's been relatively, I don't know if transparent is the right word, because there is some trickery in the way in which she handles herself, which we'll probably get into. Trickery is not necessarily the right word. Shrewd, I think, would be a better way to put it. But anyway, she's a bit shrewd in how she manages things and communicates and how she votes and different things like that. But the one area where I think she's been, she said one thing and then definitely did another is this idea of term limits. So she came in and promised, I'm only going to serve 2 terms regardless, and I'm in favor of term limits. And then, she's served, I think she's finishing up her 5th term and running for a 6th, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, she hasn't said if she's going to run yet. She hasn't thrown her hat in the ring.
She hasn't officially, right? But right after the election, she indicated or stated essentially that she was expecting to run again. So that's a way of saying you're going to run without officially having to deal with the campaign finance rules of actually running a campaign, I think is how that works. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah. So we expect that she's probably going to run, but she's already overstayed the 2 terms that she said she was going to do. And so I bring that up because, like, how do we know? We've heard this before, right? How do we know, like, you're going to do it, right?
Sure. I know. I totally understand. And as I said, I want to do it. 2 terms is enough, I think, because then, like you said, and like I've said, then you bring more new ideas, because, the individuals that are 20 years old now, after 12, they'll be in their early 30s, or their mid-30s ideas. But if you can find those individuals that believe in the United States of America and believe in what our values are, then you bring them aboard. And we just kind of perpetuate the whole idea. And I think that there are
I don't know
a number of individuals, if you look at what Charlie Kirk is doing with younger individuals, the next individuals that come in, and to start, understanding what the American values are and what we've done. And I'm okay with running with 2 terms. It doesn't bother me at all, but I want to get in there and start the process so that way others can follow.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I just bring it up because I think that's one of the things that people are going to say is like, we've heard this before, and like, why do we trust that you're going to do
Sure.
it? And I think it's something to think about. And then yeah, so like, what are the issues? I guess so. Like, we'll kind of go there because like you have to have like, here are the issues where is the reason that you're running, and why. Probably, I'm assuming those are going to be reasons that kind of differentiate you from Susan Collins.
Sure. Well, like I said, if you go to my website, you can see a lot of what my platform stands for. And so the one when we start out, and I started the speech when I was with you guys a couple of weeks ago, that the far left Democrat Party is trying to push this country towards socialism. I don't believe that. So that's one of my big things. I want to get in there and make sure that we have solid individuals who are going to stand for this country and stand for the values that this country represents, and stand for the values that our founding fathers that they put into the Constitution, and so that's broadly, that's my first one, is that I want to make sure that this country stays on the path of the way that it was founded. And this year is the 250th year of the signing of the of our Declaration of Independence. And so I think that this year is a great time for a lot of parents to teach their kids about our history. We've got bad history and good history, but let's learn it all, and then we can talk about it. So that's one thing. I also think that, well, one of the things that I mentioned on my website is, I want to codify a lot of Donald Trump's his executive orders, and with having the bill signed last week, he kind of codified a lot of some of his executive orders. But there are others that need to be codified, and so getting in and helping Republicans to start to really nail those down, that's another thing that we need to start doing. I also believe that we need to get extremely involved in our electrical grid and artificial intelligence, because if we want to become the leader in artificial intelligence, we need to really reload our electrical grid, because it needs to be updated, it needs to be rebolstered, and then it also needs to be can't think of the word, but I'll think of it and I'll come back to it. But
sure,
what's an interesting thing that you look at, like, I think it was Google was given the okay to make a small nuclear plant, which they have now. They have developed this. France has them. They're just small nuclear power plants that can then, power, let's say, a small city. Okay, well, that's great. But Google's going to use it for their AI platform, and because they need that much power. If you do any reading, a lot of the individuals that know about how much power that AI is going to take up, once we go to artificial intelligence, then we go to AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, and then we go to artificial superintelligence. And once we get to ASI, which would be 2028 to 2030, somewhere in that time frame, I think I read 99% of the energy that is generated right now is going to be needed to just supply artificial intelligence. So we need to, it's crazy. So we need to get, the Googles and the Microsofts and Facebooks and all these people, Elon Musk and what he's developing, get them. And Trump has done this because he signed the okay with, I'm pretty sure it was Google, to build their own small power plant. That's great. Let's do it. But then what you have to do is then you have to work with, and Trump's pretty good about this, is to work to then bring the regulations down. And that doesn't mean that, a nuclear power plant is spitting out, dirty water into the stream. No, it just means that we can build it here. And one of the interesting things that's happened that's in the bill is turning some of the land that the government owns and, basically giving it back or selling it to these individuals so that they can use that. We're not going to sell off the state parks and the national parks and things like that, but undeveloped land that's on the edge of a city where you could put a small nuclear power plant that would take the burden off of our energy grid would be perfect. Solar and wind are not going to do it. Okay, they will not supply the power that's needed, no matter how much. You
don't think solar and wind are the most reliable baseload forms of power?
No, not at all.
Sorry, I can't help but make fun of that. Yeah.
I took a picture of this and I set it on Facebook because over the wintertime it snows and you got all these solar reflector, solar catchers that are out there, and they're all covered in snow. And someone sent back in a comment, well, I think that even if they're buried in snow, they can still produce solar. I'm like, no, they can't because they're covered in snow. Okay, I mean they do not produce. But anyway, so here in Maine, they're putting up all these solar panels everywhere. And why waste it? Instead of doing that, instead of farmers selling their land for 400 acres to put a solar plant, put a small nuclear power plant there. That'll do much more than any solar field will do. And of course, wind turbines. Well, you saw what happened down off the coast of Nantucket when two of the wind turbines they just fell apart because they're out there in the middle of the ocean and no one tested anything. And all of a sudden, these wind turbines are falling apart and the blades are falling into the ocean. Well, did anyone do a test on what salt water and what that's going to do when it gets up? Because it gets into the fog and the fog goes through the wind turbine, and no one does. No one did any of that. So that's another big thing that I want to concentrate on. And also, I think that bringing natural gas to the Northeast, I know, working with individuals, I know New York doesn't want to build a pipeline, and I think it's Massachusetts or Connecticut doesn't want a pipeline running through. Okay, well, let's sit down and talk about it. And let's talk about how up here it's absurd that that so many homes up here still run on oil. And they do. And it's a dirty product. And they still do it because it's either that or propane. And well, let's give natural gas the opportunity to get here. That's another thing that I talk about in my platform, and also the defense industry. And one of the big things that, especially with we have us having Bath Iron Works up here, and them developing ships, and then we have Portsmouth in New Hampshire, but there's also a small facility in Kittery that they do they build these things. And we need to recognize and work with designers. Yes, we need ships, but we need ships to have the capability, because now drones are becoming more, men on the ground, boots on the ground fighting is becoming obsolete. You see what Ukraine did in Russia when they drove their drones thousands of miles into Russia and bombed their fighter pilots and their bombers. So we need to have the capability to have these ships kind of modified and work with the designers so that they can hold a lot of drones, because that's the way we're going to fight in the future. So those are some of the things that I'm interested in, and that I would like to go and work with the people in Washington to move forward.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So you brought up Ukraine, and so I feel like that leads into an interesting question: is what's your perspective on our proxy war with Russia and Ukraine? How much more money should we send to Ukraine? What's your general, I guess, feeling on the United States engaging in regime change
Right.
and doing those types of things? Yeah.
Well, I think that I don't think Putin's going to give it. I don't think he's going to give in at all. You just kind of, Trump's been working real hard to negotiate and work on negotiations, but then last week, or I think it was Friday, he went in with 550 missiles and drones and just bombed the heck out of Ukraine.
Really?
So
Okay.
I don't think he's going to give in. So I don't know where, do you just look at the people of Ukraine and Zelensky, and do you say to him, hey, listen, these 4 counties that they've already taken, that's it. You've lost it. Unless you want to keep losing, your men, because they're losing men and the Russians are losing men, but the Russians got a lot more that they can throw at it, and that's what they've been doing. They've been emptying their jails and things like that to just throw men. Could have put a gun on them, send them to war. I don't know what the answer is. Unless someone wants to say, I think that Zelensky is willing to negotiate, but then he keeps saying, I'm not going to give up the counties. Well, dude, something's got to give, or you're just going to continue to get bombed. Now, do we keep sending them military equipment? Well, thankfully, the Europeans have finally begun to get involved. They started to get involved last week, and they've made commitments. When you look at NATO and what they're starting to make commitments. Trump wanted them to go up to 5%. They're already at 2.5% to 3%. So, but I think it was France and Belgium. I don't know what Belgium has to offer, but they offered, and a couple other countries over there offered Ukraine armaments. Well, that's what we need to do. That it's Europe that needs to really get on the front lines of this, because we can send whatever we have, but the problem is if you don't have other countries that are right up there against the Russians, and somehow get them involved in the conversation, have them talk to Putin. Maybe he's tired of talking to Donald Trump. All right, well, send in somebody else to talk to Putin and just go, dude, we can't keep doing this. I mean, thousands and tens of thousands of men and women are being killed, and it's a shame. And as Trump has said, and other Republicans have said, it probably wouldn't have started under Trump, but under Obama, the Russians invaded. Under Biden, the Russians invaded. Trump was there; they don't invade. So you have a strong leader that can hopefully make peace. He made peace with Israel and the Palestinians. How that's going to work, who knows? But they're still in a ceasefire, and now they're negotiating settlement terms. No one, and so that's good. He's worked on that. He worked on, I think it was Turkey and Pakistan a month and a half or so ago when they were getting into the battle. Oh, he talked to them and just kind of knock it off, guys. What are we doing here? You both have nuclear power, and we definitely don't want you to start throwing nuclear bombs at each other. So Ukraine, you just shake your head sometimes. It's a shame what's going on, but you got two guys that just don't seem to want to give in, and I don't understand it. I don't understand why they don't want to give in, but they just don't. Other than Ukraine used to be part of Russia, and Russia thinks they want it back.
So. Yeah, it's a really interesting, from I don't know how to categorize this, but from a people group standpoint, my understanding is they're largely the same people. Kiev was one of the ancient, historical, original cities or something along those lines right. of Russia. Yep. And so it's really interesting. And in the portion, my understanding, again, I'm no expert here, but in my portion, in the portions of Ukraine that Russia has kind of taken, starting with Crimea and a number of other places, they're all
Right.
like largely Russian speaking people who,
Yep.
the rumor has, and again, how much of this is coming from Putin and trying to convince us of things, but it's kind of hard to tell. But like my understanding is they speak Russian, and that the Ukrainian government was effectively trying to get everybody to speak the other language, the Ukrainian language. I guess who knows. But anyway, like the point is like it's a bit of a complicated situation, and a lot of people, a lot of your I think your younger conservatives are more libertarian-esque when it comes to this stuff, and it's like, okay, Putin is the aggressor, sure, but they're also looking at NATO and NATO's in continuing growth being a threat to Russia, since
Right.
NATO literally exists to be a threat to Russia. They've literally why NATO exists. Actually, it was initially for the Soviet Union, but now it's basically, and so like encroaching further and further on Russia is definitely kind of like provoking Russia in a way. So your kind of younger libertarian-esque conservatives are concerned about that and the fact that like we kind of provoked this in a way, and don't believe that we should be involved in foreign wars. I personally have libertarian leanings, but like I definitely, when it comes to like our involvement outside of our country, I don't 100% line up. I do have concerns with us sending hundreds of billions of dollars in aid to what appears to me to be a con man who is running one of the most corrupt governments in Eastern
Yes.
Europe.
Yes.
Um,
When
to fight an unwinnable war. So yeah,
but that's okay. When he said, it was earlier on. I think it was towards the end of the winter. There was one conversation, and of the hundreds of billions of dollars that we sent him, he said he didn't know where hundreds of millions of that money had gone. It's like, what do you mean you don't know where it went? You know where it went. You've got it in your bank account. All of your generals have it in their bank accounts, and everyone else is just scraping off the top. And so, yeah, it's crazy. I agree. Sending hundreds of billions of dollars, no. We can better use that money here in the United States for individuals that truly need it, like our veterans, and and like I said, NATO is becoming stronger. Let them deal with it. It's on their continent. They have to deal with it.
Right. Yeah, and they should. I mean, again, Trump did a great job of getting the other countries in Europe to fund NATO rather than the United States footing the entire bill and things like that.
Right.
I think that's good. Yeah. So I'm trying to. So okay. So let's go with some fun questions. And I say fun with sarcasm.
Sure.
So one of the things that I've heard ever since I got involved in politics, and myself, which is only like really the past 3 years, is there's aspects of this sentiment that I definitely agree with, which is, and I think this is part of where you're coming from, right? Like Susan Collins, not only is she entrenched, not only has she been there longer than for 30 years essentially, I think, right, 6-year term, 5 of them, I think that amounts to, it would be 30 years by 2026. But on top of that, she doesn't like represent conservative values. So a lot of your standard conservatives, your traditional conservatives, don't like Susan Collins because she gets the label rhino, right? Republican in name only.
Yep.
So this is the reason I think we have challengers here, right? But the question becomes, okay, I get that, right? But we live in a purple state, right? And so is it possible in the current environment for somebody who actually is a true conservative, because I would say that I don't think that Susan Collins actually represents my values, but I also I'm a little pragmatic, and I look at it and I say, but Trump lost Maine, Trump the best candidate, from a policy, I know that there's other baggage with Trump, and I think the Trump supporters are like, that's just the mainstream media. And it's like, well, it is some of what he says as well. He kind of feeds into their fire intentionally to mess with them by saying things like, I might run for a third term. We want to buy, Canada should become part of the U.S. and I'm not ruling out military force. Like, so some of it's actually coming from Trump. So right. Buy Green. I'm for buying Greenland. Like, let's do that actually. But anyway, so there's some of the stuff that Trump does that is like he intentionally creates this. But when you look at it from a policy standpoint, I don't know that there's a better president that we've had in definitely in my lifetime, maybe in the last 100 years, right? I might say let's go back to Teddy Roosevelt, right? But in between there, I don't know that we have a better president from a policy standpoint. I know a lot of people love Reagan, but I actually think Trump is better on policy than Reagan. So you had Trump, right, running against Kamala Harris. Literally, I do not think like it's a little bit unbelievable, but it's also like true that Kamala Harris is a worse candidate even than Hillary Clinton. She's probably the worst presidential candidate in U.S. history. So one of the best policy candidates that we've ever had against literally, in my opinion, the worst presidential candidate in U.S. history in Kamala Harris. And again, that's significant considering the two people she followed. Biden and Hillary. You had a vegetable and just an evil person who's done a lot of horrible crap, right? And she's still a worse candidate than that. And Trump loses Maine by 6.5%. So, again, he didn't really campaign in southern Maine. He didn't do much campaigning, I think, in northern Maine. So like, but still, like, that's like, it's tough for an actual conservative to win. Who's not playing this game that Susan Collins is playing. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. I think, and because I'm in southern Maine, obviously there's a lot of Democrats down here. But I think that the Democrat Party and veering so far left has really left behind a lot of Democrats that are kind of middle of the road. And the thing is that they're moving to the Republican Party. And so and like I keep saying, we need to talk. And I do that with Democrats. I've got a handful of them down here that I talk to, and they're like, you've got my vote. You're exactly what I need, what we need, because we don't need the far left. They've gone off the deep end. We need to then bring the Democrats that are moving more towards the middle. They believe in what we believe. Many of them do. There's the abortion battle that we're always going to have. But on many things, like, with making the tax cuts from 2017 and making them permanent until they, if the Democrats come into power, they may vote them down. Okay, well, that's part of our government. But those type of things that we have common ground on, and I think that's what's bringing Democrats to the Republican side. And I think that a Republican can win Maine because of that. Because if you get away from Portland, Augusta, Bangor, and basically that little area, and you go out to the rest of Maine, they're Republicans, they're deep red. But the problem is that you have the crazies in Portland that I don't know what they want sometimes, but
I don't know, they're mentally ill.
But so you have that, and so but there are also people in Portland that you can talk to. I've been up there. I've talked to a few of them, and not a few, but because of my job, I go to visit these people, or I'm in front of these people, and you can sit and you can talk with them, and they have middle America values also. But my aunt and uncle, they have voted Democratic since they were able to vote. So let's talk since the 1950s, and they won't come off it. And just because, well, I've always voted Democrat. Okay, well, that's wrong. And I think that's where a lot of the individuals now are beginning, the younger group is beginning to realize, I understand that my parents are Democrats, but I don't agree with what's going on. And a lot of the parents are looking at it going, I don't agree with what's going on either. So let's look at the Republican Party. And I think we can bring those kind of people over, and we can win them over. And I don't fear being a Republican in Maine and being conservative. I'm okay with that. But there's going to be situations that we're going to have conversations on. Okay, let's talk about it. That's why our government was established, not to fight each other, to talk about it.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think obviously you don't go into running for office like this because it's not easy, right? And assume you're not going to have a win, or you don't have a chance to win. So you're doing this so you believe that you've got a chance, and so
Yes.
This is something that's worth endeavor, worth engaging in. So you believe that a traditional Republican has a chance to win a statewide election here in the state of Maine because of the issues that you mentioned. So what are the issues that you would say, and even are the ones that help us win over people in the middle? What are the issues that they're specifically getting, the ones that are paying attention? Because again, you get too many people that just I have been Republican, I'm historically Republican, Trump is the Antichrist. I can't I can't vote for Republicans, whatever it is. What are these issues that aside from the people that just kind of have their head in the sand on the Democrat side and are just buying everything that they're being told and just voting, what are the issues that are bringing people over to our side, would you say?
Well, I think that when you look at especially Maine, because we're a state that has a lot of visitors. Obviously, over this weekend, you saw how many people came to Maine and the traffic we had and those type of things. We have a lot of small business owners. And so I think that that's one thing that you can really get involved with those individuals. And that's one way to have them vote for you. The farmers and the ranchers, we don't have many ranchers, but we do have farmers. And so to take care of them, it's interesting because part of my family is from Kansas and Oklahoma, and they're farmers and ranchers. And they're Democrats. And I can't figure it out because you live in Oklahoma and in Kansas. You should be Republican, but they're not. And it's just an interest. That's the way they've always voted. So I think that being open, back in 2016 and 2020, abortion was the big issue. Abortion and that type of thing. Well, that's pretty much been settled. So let's just leave that one behind. The states are going to do what the states are going to do. And so I think that.
So, and just to be clear, it sounds like the states are going to, and you're in favor of that. You prefer that decision be handled at the state level. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. It should be handled at the state level because you let those individuals, and like Janet Mills has done here in Maine, at 9 months you can have an abortion. That's absolutely insane, but she signed it into law last summer. And to me, that's insane, but that's okay. So we didn't vote for that. No. That's what happened, so.
Agreed. And it's interesting too, and this kind of gets at the radical nature of the left. And I think some of the areas, even though that is a state level, and you're saying federally, you're not interested in having that, you're interested in keeping it at a state level. But I think that's one of the things, because if you look at the majority of Americans and the majority of Mainers, the majority are more pro-choice, right? That's just a reality. If you look at things nationally, at some level, but when you talk about the limits, they almost I think it's somewhere around 80% of Americans favor not having it go beyond. I think it was viability, whatever that was. That kind of whatever the standard was that the Supreme Court held prior to it being overturned. Right. Most Americans agree that it shouldn't go beyond that. So, and here in the state of Maine and in a couple of other deep blue states, they're going all the way up until birth, despite the fact that even here in Maine, the people generally don't support that. Right. And so anyway, that's one of the. But anyway,
you ask, the policies that can get Democrats or middle of the road Democrats and those type of things. I think a lot of what Trump did, or what the legislation did last week, is really going to help us, because if you look at what happened last week, that extending the tax cuts was a big thing for middle income people. Another big thing was the tax exemptions on capital investments. You have a tax exempt. You can write off 100% of your capital investment against your taxes. And well, what that's going to do is that's going to move more companies to be able to then come to the United States, which then brings, then you need to, and see, I believe that as a senator, you need to work with your state also, because you need to really get with those guys and go, all right, let's say it's myself and Angus King. All right, we're making a trip we're going back to Maine, and we're going to talk to the House and the Senate of Maine and say, guys, this is what's happening. Now we need to get business to come to Maine so that we can hire more people, and then more people have jobs, and then we get more taxes and those type of things. And that's how so that's another policy, because I believe that people want to work. It's just that they become so comfortable in just getting that paycheck that keeps them just on the edge. Well, if you put an opportunity in front of them, I believe that they're going to take that opportunity to better themselves. So that's another issue that you look at and you talk to people about. So yeah, it may be difficult, but I don't think it's unwinnable. That's for sure.
Yeah. What do you think about, because we haven't hit this yet, and it's one of the hot topics of today, and I do think it's one that is helping us. I think you've kind of highlighted. I think big picture is, and I think you're spot on about this, by the way. And I think what you've been talking about is essentially economics. That economics and encouraging an economy of growth in America is a much more impactful thing, and being able to win elections. And I think that's absolutely true. I think the moral issues, while I think they're worth fighting, I don't think win us as many people over to our side. They do win us some people, but they don't. The vast majority of people are less interested in, I think, the moral issues, generally speaking. Right. But economics tends to move people's vote much more than economics, and I think also safety and when we look at what's going on internationally and stuff like that, peace oriented presidents, I think. Right. But one of the issues that I think is a big hot topic issue is the issue of boys and girls sports. Okay. And I think that's one.
Go with tariffs.
Tariffs? We can talk about tariffs. That's
we'll go with boys and girls sports. That's fine.
Yeah, but what are your thoughts on that? And yeah.
Well, that's a 90-10 issue. Boys and girls sports is a 90-10 issue. It really is. 90% of Americans do not believe that guys should be playing in girls sports, that they should be going into girls' bathrooms, that they should be showering with other girls. Obviously, and you may have seen, I know it was a holiday weekend, but the University of Pennsylvania last week had to send out letters to all the girls that Leah Thomas, I can't remember what his real name is, but I
think it's Matthew or something like that.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, I can't remember. But they had to send letters to these guys, to these girls, and then say you actually won, or you came in second, those type of things. And then they also said that going forward, that it will not be happening again, because there's no reason why a 6'4" dude should be in a girl's locker room. It's just crazy. That makes no sense. And most schools nowadays, let's talk about bathrooms. All right, well, a lot of schools nowadays have bathrooms that you can go into, and it's just you. It's just like a unisex bathroom, but it's just you. You lock the door, you go to the bathroom, you get out. But there's no reason why a 17-year-old dude needs to be going into the girls' bathroom. No, That doesn't make any sense to me at all. So
Yeah.
I'm totally against it. I'm part of the 90%. Just consider me part of the 90%.
Well, I assumed as much. You don't find very many people. There are a few, I think, that on the Republican side, where we had in the state senator, former Republican state senator Rick Bennett, who's now running for governor as an independent. And I comment on this for a variety of reasons. One is I just think it's one of the silliest decisions that he could make in supporting biological males competing in women's sports. But he did that, and he did that. I think as a tactic to try and be like middle of the road in the gubernatorial race. And I'm like, okay, if that was your idea, you should have not picked an issue where most of the Democrats are against it, because 67% of Democrats are against that. So the ones that are for it are your hardline Democrats. You're not going to win any of their votes. And so, sorry, Rick, if you were really interested in winning the moderate Democrats over and continuing and winning some Republicans, you probably should have chose some different issues, especially since I don't think his vote made a difference. His vote was not the deciding factor. Right. But anyway, so it's a little bit of a foolish thing that he's doing. So outside of him, though, I don't know of very many Republicans that are supportive of this type of thing. So I assume that that's where you were. And I'm hoping that this will, again, continue to win some people over to our side, because it's just, it's a 90-10 issue. And it's such an obvious issue to anybody that's paying attention. And here in Maine, really briefly, I didn't realize until recently that one of the biological males that's competing isn't even identifying as a female. He's identifying as non-binary, and then identifying as non-binary is allowed to compete in women's sports, which is just mind-blowing on top of the fact in the first place, not even claiming to be a woman. It's like,
and Janet Mills, when she was at that at the press conference with Donald Trump, and she said, well, we're gonna follow state and federal regulations. And, Trump said, well, the federal regulation is this. And she said, well, we're going to follow the state regulation. And he said, well, she said, we'll see you in court. And Trump said, great, let's go to court. Well, that's another thing that drives Democrats absolutely out of their mind and moves them towards the Republican Party.
Yeah. That stubborn, stubbornness there. Yeah. Cause again, this is a 90-10 issue. I think that we will win some stuff as a result of this. Again, you get a lot of motivated people as a result of these types of policies, and people start to question things and then look into things a little bit more deeply. Next thing you know, these people who initially started just being like, this issue has turned me. Now they start thinking about other things and realize, wow, the Democrats are just like, I'm not saying that none of the Republicans are lying and there's not like some games going on there. I try to be like, I guess not bipartisan, but like open, there are problems within the Republican Party, right? I'm not blind. We have issues. There's corruption, right? All this kind of stuff. But when you compare what's going on in the Republican Party versus what's going on in the Democrat Party, it's like night and day. Like, it's just like, there's very little going on over there that's any good. If anything at this point, but yeah, and this is one of our issues that hopefully wakes more and more people up. So one of the, I feel like I have another question, but so one of the other things that I think you mentioned, I guess, on your website, I saw was related to like codifying Doge cuts, which I think our Republicans, our conservatives here would be very, very happy with. I think you kind of addressed all the other specific things, that are on the website from what I can tell. But so you're doing this, and what does this look like? Obviously, like, I guess one of the questions is like fundraising, because like in order to win against an incumbent, in a state like Maine, that's not going to be easy, right?
Right.
And you're going to need funds, I'm assuming. So, So, and you're also going to need like a certain number of signatures. Is that right?
No, you don't need signatures. If you run for state, you need signatures. If you're running federally, you don't need signatures.
Really?
Yeah. I read through everything, and that nothing federally mentions that you need signatures.
Okay.
Yeah. So nothing that I could find that I was reading. And you have to fund your campaign account which I've done. And obviously, because I'm talking to you and I've talked to the Cumberland County, Republicans and the York County Republicans. And so, yes, I'm not going to argue. It is difficult because right now, Susan Collins has really, she may have a stranglehold on a lot of the PACs that will support her and give her, larger sums of money. And so, that's a tough one. But we've begun in a small way. I've got a couple individuals that are on Substack that have started to talk about me and are really supporting me. And so there are things going on as we're moving forward that will get us in front of more people. More people will go to, Carmen, the number 4 Senate.com, and they'll donate to me, and we'll keep moving forward. And so, and like I said in the speech on, a couple of weeks ago, and I've said in the speech in York County, I'm not a multimillionaire. I need help doing this. I need everyone's help doing this. I need help from people all across the country. And so, that's one of the things maybe I don't want to say it, but I do want to say it. Susan, and it's another one of those complacency things. I think Susan Collins has $3 million in her war chest. All right, well, that means we're going to have to raise some money. So, because the Republican Party cannot donate to any one of our campaigns, or the Democrat Party, that's just the way it's set up, until after the primaries. Then they can do it. Then you can have the party itself can donate to the campaign. So that's how it runs.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think one of the interesting things that I feel like is likely true is like, I don't know if I say it's likely true. I hear things that like people say things about like to oppose somebody like Susan Collins is to commit political suicide because she is so ingrained. And not only does she have that war chest, right? This is just the reality of what you have to overcome, right? So I'm not is that she spends some of that helping candidates get elected in the years, like candidates at lower levels, like the House and the State House, State Senate, stuff like that. She spends money supporting those candidates specifically in election years, I believe. And so you've got a lot of people who are motivated to help her because of the help that they expect is going to come from her because of her position in Washington, how long she's been there, all the PACs that you've kind of mentioned. Right. So it's interesting, but yeah, so it's something that's gonna. So you need a lot of support.
But if you look at her approval record right now for Republicans, it's somewhere around 33 or 34%. So there are a lot of Republicans who have really they're beginning to take a look at other individuals, and I'm one of them. And so I'm going to keep running, and I'm going to keep doing it because I'm Italian. I'm hard-headed. So I like the battle. It's fun. I enjoy it. I love talking to people. And so I think I can win more and more people on my side.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, so I was talking to a good friend of mine who was basically mentioning.
You broke up on me.
Oh, am I back? Can you hear me now? Oh, Carmen, did I lose you or did you lose me?
Wait, you broke up on me there. I didn't hear you.
Okay, that's all right. I think we're back now. Can you hear me now? Oh, and I can see you. I think you're moving again. Okay. Sorry, technology doesn't always work perfectly, people at home, but so
do you have thunderstorms up in your area?
I haven't heard any. But one of the critiques, I think, obviously, of Susan Collins, I think one of the things that a lot of your conservatives say is that she votes more with the Democrats than she does with the Republicans. Yes. And she does it, I think, strategically. Is one of the other things that I've heard is that, like, basically when you look at it, whenever it generally matters, she tends to not vote against us. But when it doesn't matter, when it does matter, she tends to vote with us. Right. But like the argument has been that like there are a lot more people paying attention now and realizing that, and that's going to eventually, like, this game of trying to like look like you're on both sides and you're kind of playing both sides of the aisle, that eventually you're going to alienate enough people, and you're gonna have some problems. And there's a lot of people that when they talk about Susan Collins, there's some who are saying that this is a concern for her in this election, that it might actually hurt her. I don't know if that's true or not, but it is at least interesting is that when you are, kind of, you seem to be playing both sides, like neither side really feels like you're on their side. And so both sides have reason. You've got a lot of conservatives, a lot of Republicans that I hear that are just like, they have a lot of venom for Susan Collins because she doesn't represent their values. But then you also have the Democrats who are very upset with her because she ever voted for anything that they don't agree with. Right. So like she voted in favor of, she voted against Hegseth. So the Republicans hate her. She voted in favor of Kash Patel. So the Democrat, anyway, it's like all these things. And so it's like, there's a lot of stuff that's working against her. I think this, regardless of what happens, I think this is going to be one of the more challenging election cycles for the Collins campaign, should she actually declare, which I think she will.
You also have to realize that, she voted against Trump's bill last week. She voted to when she voted for Trump to be
impeached.
To impeach, that's the word I was looking for. Yeah, she voted to impeach him. So she's lost that vote. And the people that support Trump and that support his ideals, I think that she's lost them. And so there's a lot of them around. And so you talk to them, and then you talk to the Democrats that have moved more to the middle of the road, and you start building the coalition that way. And that's what I've been trying to do.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, well, thanks for coming on the podcast, and thanks for taking the time. I think when like we need more people who are willing to get involved in politics and willing to do difficult things and take on challenges. I appreciate anybody who's willing to like stick their neck out, especially somebody who lives in southern Maine, in the midst of this insane.
It's not that bad down here.
Are you sure? Maybe you're in a different part of southern. I'm in Westbrook, right outside of Portland. It's a little different here. But either way, in southern Maine, it's a little bit much less conservative. Although I think your comment is right, that there are more and more people who are waking up, who are getting concerned with how radicalized the left has become, and hopefully more and more people come over to our side. And I'd love to see a true conservative representing us in Augusta, but in DC. And if people want to hear more about you, it's Carmen for Senate.
Senate.com.
So we've got this event coming up, the Cumberland County Republican Committee, because in addition to this podcast, I'm also the chair of that, called the Songo River Sip and Savor. We've got a number of gubernatorial candidates that are going to be there, and a number of other people. I'd love to have you maybe come and join. People could meet you in person if you're interested. It's August. What month are we in? July 31st, Thursday, July 31st in Naples, on the Songo River, Naples, Maine. Yeah, Naples, Maine, up in the Lakes region here in Cumberland County.
Send me that information, and I'll be sure to be there.
All right, sounds good, and it'll be a great event in general. Cash bar, some hors d'oeuvres, and so I'll send you the information. And anybody who wants to meet Carmen, that might be a great opportunity to do it, as well as a couple of the gubernatorial candidates. Jim Libby is going to be there. Bobby Charles is going to be there, and what's his name there? Oh gosh, I just texted him earlier today. Nope, I got the wrong name. That keeps Owen McCarthy. There we go. Owen McCarthy is going to be there. He's the last person I did a podcast with, as if I can't remember his name. But anyway, so they're all going to be there, and as well as a number of other people. So you guys should check that out. In addition to that, I should note a number of things. One, the Muddy Waters podcast is not free for me to put on. It costs a decent amount of money. So if you want to support the podcast, you appreciate what we're doing, we've got some merch that you can buy, stuff like this hat, a number of other fun things. that should be good impulse buys. One of my favorites is this one right here. It's a bumper sticker for you, those of you who are not watching. It's boys are boys, girls are girls. 2 + 2 = 4. A nice, fun little thing to be able to support the podcast, and a number of other items there. You can find that all on muddywaters.us. If you're interested. And the other thing that I'll just mention real quick is we have another event coming up on July 15th. It's really important that we get a ton of people to show up for this. So Representative Laurel Libby is coming. We had invited her to come to a Cumberland County meeting, and then we did a little bit of a shift, and this is called Justice and Jazz, and we're going to talk about protecting girls' sports and spaces. We're going to talk about free speech. And one of the things that's interesting is that since this event has kind of gained some traction, the left has gone crazy a little bit, and they're really reacting negatively to this, and they've tried to shut down the venue. They're organizing a protest, though we will ensure we have a means and process to ensure that this will be a safe and secure event. But they tried to get the venue shut down. We have a band, the State Street Traditional Jazz Band. They've tried to reach out to the band and convince them to not participate in this event, because if you do anything that allows Laurel Libby to use her free speech, you are contributing to suicide in teenagers. That's what they're claiming, which is factually inaccurate. We know. But is what they're doing. So we need Republicans, conservatives, anybody who's on our side on these issues, who believes in free speech, who believes in protecting girls' sports and spaces, to show up at the Orion Performing Arts Center from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on July 31st, if you can make it. You can go to ccrcme.com to find more information and RSVP. So there's that. And that's all I have. Thank you all for watching. Carmen, thanks again. Any last word, not last words, but final words on the podcast before we go?
Just I would hope that if anyone has any more questions and would like to know some more of my issues, you can go to Carmen, 4senate.com, and take a look at the website and tell me what you think. Donate if you'd like to. That'd be fantastic. Like I said, I'm not a millionaire. I need everyone's help. And I'm going to keep on going. And I appreciate it, Chuck. This was fun. I enjoyed it. I hope we can do it again.
Awesome. Yeah, no, sounds good. It's been a great conversation, and you took some of my I would say challenging questions, because like the challenge of trying to unseat somebody like Susan is not easy, and so you took those really well and had great answers, I think, and so we really appreciate you taking the time. Are you on any social? Like, are you on X?
I have my Facebook page. I have the campaign Facebook page, which is Carmen for Senate on Facebook. I'm also on X, and also started on Substack.
So all right, nice. And what are you on X? What's your
Carmen for Senate?
Carmen for Senate. Pretty consistent. Carmen, the number 4 Senate. Okay.
Across the board.
All right. Yes, well, if you want to find him and ask any additional questions, that's where you can find him. All right. Thanks again for coming on, and thanks everybody else. We'll be back on here. I think Wednesday in the morning, actually, Wednesday, 10 a.m., we have gubernatorial candidate David Jones is going to be on. So we'll see you all then. And Carmen, just hang out for just a little bit real quick, and see you all later.